I'm going to call our meeting to order. Could I have a motion, please, concerning the agenda?
I move approval of the agenda.
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, the same sign. That motion carries. Could I have a similar motion, please, concerning the consent agenda?
I move to approve the consent agenda.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Any customers to be heard or recognitions you'd like to make, Mr. Schwant?
No.
Thank you. Any old business, Mr. Schwant?
No, sir.
Thank you again. Members of the City Council, hello Heidi, how are you?
Very well, thank
It's
you.
a beautiful day outside and you're stuck here with us.
Could be worse.
Could be, thank you. What do you have to report?
Not really much at all. Last night, City Council just approved some easements. I don't know if you will all be a part of that project, or if you'll have to, I don't know if there'll be any utility stuff along with those easements or not.
Is that on the Sims project?
Yeah.
I think we are involved in that. Are those easements drawn in such a fashion that they meet our requirements as well?
They work pretty closely on the easements with us, so, but yeah, that's a major project for us as well on the water
Okay.
side. Yep.
So that really was about it. It was on the consent agenda, so it wasn't discussed or anything. It was just.
Yeah, the only people who get excited about easements are real estate lawyers anyway, so what can I say? Members of the Public Service Commission, anything to report? It's nice to see Mr. Bakke back.
Thank you.
We missed you, at least Ralph really missed you. Okay.
I am not going to give an update.
You have a question, John?
It's more of a specific question. If at the last EDA meeting, there was discussions about having a separate location for staff on EDA. I think it also went to the council as well, and they're continuing researching that as a viable option. So at this point, that's all
You'll just keep us informed?
I'll do that.
Thank you. Mr. General Manager. Oh, excuse me.
It is not necessarily MPS related, but the Minnesota legislature is going to be on break late March, early April. And on Thursday, the 2nd of April, the two representatives, Paul Marquardt, Ben Leon, and Senator Ken Eakin, will all be over at the Moorhead Library giving an update on what's happening with the Minnesota legislature starting at 6:30.
Okay.
I'll remind again at following meetings.
Please do. Thank you. Now, Mr. General Manager.
Well, and on that note, I sent you an email earlier today, and I'm going to ask you if you want to see those emails from time to time, but on the legislative issues, I sent an email to Senator Kent Eakin about municipal power agencies in Minnesota that were going to be subject to open meeting law, and they're not subject to open meeting law right now, and they don't want to be. Cooperatives are not, and investor-owned utilities are not, and when they're doing power agreements and those types of things, they really didn't want to be open. So I mean, Missouri River Energy Services is opposing that bill, and they asked us to send a communique to our senator, and so I did that, and I did CC you on that, and I don't do that very often, so I thought, do you want to be informed when I do that, or do you want me to just update you at meetings? Because
I didn't even know that you'd sent an email.
okay,
If you did, so I missed it.
it was probably later this afternoon, so I don't know if maybe you haven't seen that
Well,
yet. So.
that explains it. Are the municipal power agencies considered to be a part of a political subdivision?
Oh, let's see.
Because I just want to know how they're exempted under the open meeting law.
Minnesota has separate statutes for municipal power agencies, and they're not
So they're
subject to
exempted
the-
from coverage at this time?
Yep.
Okay. Interesting.
So, anyway, that's just one update. Yeah, Commissioner Dave Anderson is at the APPA National Conference, so that's our legislative connection on the federal side. So that's, I'm sure he'll give a report, and I will give a report on when he comes back on that one, because there's some federal legislative issues that we've got position papers on now that we can provide to you, and I thought I'd wait until Dave comes back so he can kind of update you on what he's heard in DC.
Okay.
The other item was, yeah, I think that was it. Unless
Les,
there's
did
any
you
other
have a
questions.
question or an observation you wanted to make?
I have an observation I want to make. I truly do appreciate the fact that Minnesota has open meeting laws, and our city council was first to go online with audio and video. Other committees for the city we followed not too far after. And I surely do wish that the Moorhead School District would see fit to do the same thing.
Is that in the form of a motion?
I don't think we have any authority over them.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you, and for the people at home that happen to be watching this meeting, we are subject to the open meeting laws, which we take very, very seriously, and the people in this community have an absolute right to know what it is that we're doing, and I know that the city council feels the same way, and if there are questions that go unanswered at meetings, people can feel free to contact us. Some people do on a fairly regular basis. At the same time, yeah, I tend to agree with you. I wish other political subdivisions in the greater Moorhead area would do likewise.
And I was reminded of it yesterday afternoon. I was in having the oil changed on my pickup, and the other guy was sitting here. We started chatting. He said, I watch you on TV. And we talked for a while, and it reminded me that we have one political entity that is not.
You know, it's amazing to me how many people will come up to you, whether you're getting your oil
Absolutely.
change or in a parking lot or whatever, and say the same thing to me. My normal response is, you need to get a life, because it's not the most exciting TV. But there are a lot of people out there that do happen to watch these meetings and do feel engaged because they have the opportunity to hear what it is that we're talking about. And that's their right, their absolute right.
Thank you.
I agree with you, Les.
Just a clarification for Bill. Did you say that you sent the commission an email saying that we were requesting support, or did you say you sent an email in support of not having that?
Well, actually, I don't believe I sent it yet. I think it's actually on my computer, because if you didn't, yeah, you didn't get it.
So you lied.
Well, I got a phone call and I didn't get back to it. So it's sitting there drafted on my, so now you can say, you know, do you want it or not? What it was is basically passing on Missouri River Energy Services opposition to the legislation, which is going to go into committee this Friday. So basically we were encouraging Senator Aiken? Eakin. I don't know if it was Eakin or Aiken. To talk to the author and the chair, and that they're opposed to it. So we've talked about this before, you know, whether or not, well, I'm probably getting further on with your question.
I think you're going in the right direction.
Okay, you know, just basically, do you want me communicating on behalf of the commission, myself, you know, MRES? I mean, how do you want that to actually take place? Because, I mean, some of these things come up during our off periods, you know, so we have to, I mean, they send a legislative alert and say, would you help us? Would you talk to your, you know, your senator or representative? So it's probably, that's kind of my question. No,
Well, it wasn't a matter of whether or not we wanted a copy. It was a question of whether or not we wanted you to take a statement or position on behalf of the board. Is that what you're saying?
Well,
I don't know that you can take a position on behalf of the board
No.
until the board takes a position.
right, right. No, I know that. It's like, do you want to see these legislative alerts or my action upon those alerts? You know, like this one is one that's really on behalf of MRS. They're the ones that sent the alert saying, hey, we're going to be subject to open meeting law. Minnesota's got this draft bill. We oppose it. Would you contact your legislator? So now, do you have a follow-up question, or?
Well, I think there was some discussion the last time we were requested to send a letter regarding a political position that we're having, and I don't know if there was a firm decision, but it seemed like it was, the consensus was that we maybe shouldn't be having political positions on certain topics. And I may have misstated
Yep,
that.
yep.
But that's the reason for the discussion here, is to see if we want to continue on a discussion with that or not.
I wouldn't mind the discussion, or we can do it at our strategic planning session, because I was going to bring those type of communications up. Because It is a good question, because I'm sure there's a continuum of, you know, MRES, open meeting law issue versus something that might be much more, you know, bipartisan, controversial on this other side. You know, how do you want us to approach on those? Because, I mean, the one that's bipartisan, controversial, I wouldn't take a position on. I would bring it to the commission, get their position, they can vote on it. Then I would say it's the position of our commission that you do this or that.
That answer your question? Les?
I'm thinking about this because I'm on other boards and commissions, and I do get similar kind of requests that, you know, contact your legislators and promote our opinion on this topic. And that's really what it is, promoting an opinion. My immediate reaction is that you should run it through our chair before you do a political type statement, as John is indicating down there. If it may be controversial, I think it ought to be on our agenda.
Yep.
And that's what John said as well, I believe.
Although I'm not asking anybody to run things through me, I tend to agree with you that if it's a controversial position, we should talk about it. And quite frankly, I don't know what our reasons would be for opposing or being in favor of that particular issue. I don't know how many things our Missouri River wants to handle confidentially, like rates and all that kind of thing. I mean, before we take a position, I mean, under no circumstances will we stop you from taking a position and representing your own thoughts on a matter. That's your right. That's democratic government. But I tend to agree with Les. Sometimes before we take that position, we should talk about it. And I think we've done that before. We've had a couple of things that we didn't have everybody willing to sign on letters and so forth. And that's good.
Yeah, I mean, this is a good discussion, and, you know, the legislative position papers that you saw at the last meeting, you know, those tend to be the, you know, the transmission-related or generation-related type things. You know, we don't really have you approve those position statements. We could, I suppose, and then if anything comes up along those lines, then I've kind of got the authorization. This one would be one of those cases where this one popped up and it's nobody.
Well, and oftentimes those questions will come up or legislation will come up and nobody, they might think it's a simple amendment to something that's existing. They don't recognize what the long-term consequences are going to be, and oftentimes then we should educate them as to those types of things. And I think you've noticed before that this body isn't necessarily a rubber stamp for anybody's positions. And so if there is something we should be discussing, we should take the time to do so.
Okay, thank you for that.
Item D is to accept the report on the 2015 to 2020 power system reliability upgrades. Is Mr. Schmidt going to talk about this?
He is, and I'll maybe just start just by saying that in a few Saturdays here, we're going to have a strategic planning session, and some of these items, both on the water side and electric side, such as this one, we've put on there just for information prior to those meetings. We may not go into much detail on these at that Saturday morning meeting, but you know, you may have a question or something about that. So Travis did a nice job, pulled together about 4 pages of information on the external and internal transmission systems that we have in Moorhead, and there's a lot of stuff going on. So wanted you to update you on this.
Travis, would you like to identify yourself to our viewers at home?
Sure. Travis Schmidt, Electrical Engineering Manager. Back first meeting of February 10th, we provided a report basically going over what we've done over the past 5 years from 2010 to 2015, and wanted to give you a report on what we can foresee coming up in the future as well. And that's basically what this report is kind of laying out for you. Like Bill said, it does talk about the internal and external transmission system items that are going on, both external to our 115 system, so it will be a lot of things, MRES, WAPA type items, and then also internal to us that we deal with locally or internally as staff. I guess first one to start off with would be our CapEx 2020 project. Now this is again an external, and we'll go over the externals first and then internals after that. CapEx 2020 is a large-scale transmission project all over Wisconsin, Minnesota, North Dakota, and South Dakota. Putting a large line, as most of you have seen if you've had to travel to the cities along the interstate. That project, over the past 30 years, there hasn't been a whole lot of transmission work, and this is probably one of the biggest projects in that time frame. Again, there's a lot of stuff going on out in the Bakken as well, but this one is local to us, and we do have some buy-in on this, as our MRES power supplier does have about 11% buy-in of this project. So, again, this CapEx 2020 project is about a $2 billion project, and there's several companies involved, IOUs, co-ops. Everybody is just kind of tied into it, just trying to get the transmission system upgraded around the area. Another item of external use is NERC, our North American Reliability Corporation. Currently, we've got 2 external items that we're working on. One's called the Transmission Operator and Transmission Planner. And we're working very closely with MRES on this. Currently, we're a DP, which is a distribution provider, and a load-serving entity. It's an LSE. And then we're also a transmission owner. What's happening is we are also seeing some other NERC changes where they're looking to possibly get us tied into the transmission operator and transmission planning type processes. And these processes or criteria do require a lot of additional staff time and a lot of additional training, and could cost MPS a lot of money. What we're trying to do is we're trying to get WAPA to complete these services for us. And by doing that, it should help us reduce our costs internally about $700,000 roughly for the transmission operator. We still haven't figured out the cost for the transmission planning, but could possibly cost about the same amount. So with WAPA doing those services for us, it'll definitely have some cost we'll see from WAPA for those services, but it'll definitely be a lot less than we could expect to do it internally with additional staff and training. We've also got the Southwest Power Pool. WAPA, as of October 1 of this year, will be moving into the Southwest Power Pool. And by doing that, we have some other transmission-related items going on. WAPA is doing this because they've got a lot of work out in the Bakken going on that is costing them a lot of money. And by looking at going into a larger, I guess, transmission operating pool or area, it'll help reduce those costs. They were trying to negotiate with MISO, which is the Midwest Independent System Operator, and Southwest Power Pool to try to alleviate some of these costs for their members that they have now. And MISO was not very happy about that and did not want to negotiate those costs. They felt that it was something that WAPA should pay in full and not worry about it. However, Southwest Power Pool did agree to those costs being distributed amongst the full pool of members. So again, that's something that's of importance that is going on, and staff is continually working on that, trying to reduce those costs. We will see some benefit to that. We'll see about a $200,000 annual or monthly increase in costs coming back or payment coming back from WAPA or the Southwest Power Pool. And those are things we're working on now with MRES, trying to get lined out and figured out. However, we do plan to see some increased costs for purchase power as well by going into this pool. Right now, we're kind of thinking that the two will negate themselves, but we don't have final numbers on that. So as things come up, we'll bring those up to you on that as well. Want to talk some about the internal stuff now as well. Currently, we're working on a master plan update for our internal system. This will deal with distribution, transmission, substation, several different items. It's about a 12-year plan. Usually every 5 to 6, maybe 7 years, we reevaluate that plan because we're about halfway through it and maybe need to make adjustments based off what's going on in our system. Has growth slowed down? Has it increased? We need to make adjustments to that plan based off of how everything is going. And about the half year point, or getting to about halftime of that plan or that master plan is a good time to reevaluate it. So that's what we're looking at doing in 15. Hopefully we'll have a report to you guys before the budget season really hits full speed on that for next year, for 2016, so we can make adjustments to the budgets if necessary. We're also got a couple of transmission projects, or one major transmission project that's going on right now. We're going to be looking at relocating about 2 miles of line over in West Fargo. We're working on the agreement right now with West Fargo, trying to get that completed. And later in the meeting, we'll talk about the award bid for that project as well. Let's see. Substation projects, we got 2 of those going on this year. One project, with that, we've got 1 transmission sub and 5 distribution substations. We're going to be working on our transmission substation this year, replacing some 1980s vintage or 79 vintage breakers, and we're going to be updating those. And then we're also doing a containment area in our southeast substation for both our transformers, so things that we need to take care of. Again, NERC requirements, some of the things going on with NERC. Like we talked about earlier, we got transmission operator, transmission planning going on. We also have a few other things that are changing from day to day. NERC is very hard to pinpoint down. They are always making changes to their requirements and how they want to operate things. And a lot of it's just learning and things that change and how people operate things. They're on a learning basis as well. One thing that has come out that's good is we don't have to do a 6-year plan or a 6-year audit anymore. They've gone away from that. However, it's going to require a little more staff time. It'll equal out, but we won't have to spend so much time on the audits and prepping for those, but we will see more on a quarterly basis, staff spending more time to provide more self-certifications for those requirements, which, like I said, should equate out. Basically, that's about all I've got for the report, and I guess at this point in time, we'll bring more forth to you, but I'm open for questions if you have any at this point.
Anybody have any questions for Travis?
Maybe just to reiterate the dollar amounts that Travis talked about on the external part. I mean, we're looking at trying to avoid about $700,000 for the transmission operator agreement. Same $700,000 annually for the transmission planning activities. So there's 1.4 million annually. So these are big numbers. And then with WAPA going into the Southwest Power Pool, us getting reimbursed for our transmission is something that we've actually tried to get WAPA to do many, many years, because believe it or not, there is power flow through our system. And they're going to reimburse us to the tune of $200,000 per month. So $2.4 million. So I mean, it looks like it could be positive for us. However, there's going to be an increase as well in rates, transmission rates from SPP. Like Travis said, we don't know what those are yet. We'll know probably, well, at least by October, we'll have a good idea of what they're going to be, and then they'll probably be adjusted over the next few years. So we'll keep you informed on, if we're positive or negative on some of those numbers, but working real hard to keep them positive.
Okay. Any questions? Could I have a motion, please, to accept Travis's report?
I move to accept item 8D.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, the same sign. That motion carries. That brings us down to item 9.
Before we go to item 9,
Yes?
a little quick for me again for this meeting. On 8C, just for clarification, for Bill, I am not familiar with the acceptable power factor. And there's a letter in our materials here, so could you just share a little more information about that for me?
Do you want to take the first shot at it, or you want me to take first shot at it?
Are we going to have 2 engineers battling back and forth on the definition of this?
Well, I'm just thinking I might keep it a little higher level than
Yeah.
this engineer here, but if you want to give it a shot, you sure can.
Sure. So, based off our rates and our billing, we can get charged for having a bad power factor, and that basically having a lot of motor load or a lot of air conditioning load, things like that cause our power factor to go down. 1 is the number we want to try to stay close to. 0.95 is the lowest we can be at, and we get about a 10-hour window of being below that annually. So every year, MRES looks at our year-long power factor and calculates it out and tries to see where we're at. And in 2014, we didn't actually have any hours below that .95 power factor. So what we do, if we have a low or a bad power factor, we put capacitors into the system, or capacitor banks into the system. So trying to keep it within that range.
Is that a sufficient response, Mr. Ogala?
Well, not as for layman. Are you saying it is how efficient we are managing our power source
Yeah, be pretty
Yeah,
close to
it's
that.
Or
how
power use.
efficiently,
or power use?
how efficiently our loads are.
Yeah.
So I mean, all the, like Travis mentioned, the large industrial and all the air conditioners out there in the summertime. But if they're running motors of any kind, motors, if they don't have the right capacitance on them, will be less efficient from a, using the wires standpoint. So by putting capacitors on them, you get closer and closer to 100% load factor. The problem is if you put the capacitors on and then they turn the motor off, it actually makes us go the other direction, and we become inefficient the other way. So switchable capacitors are the best. So if the motor's on, the capacitor turns on. Obviously, you don't do that with air conditioners. So in the summertime, it is harder to get, we have to put capacitors in our substations and switch them on and off. But, what Missouri River is doing is they're trying to make sure we get as close to 100% as we can, and they're going to penalize us if we don't. So there's a penalty if we don't. So they give us a report each year, tell us how we're doing, and then, our engineers have to plan for where and how we're going to operate capacitors within our system.
Yeah.
The best is closest to the load. So they just put some at Bush Ag. Crystal Sugar probably has some.
Yep, we got a couple there, and we're looking at changing the way we do our northeast sub and actually moving some of that capacitors out there.
And excuse me here, but a capacitor's function is to control.
So when you have your motor load and it reduces your power factor, by putting a capacitor in there, it brings that power factor back up closer to 1. So it's like it basically tries to negate what the motor is doing.
It's an electronic storage device.
Yep.
Or electric storage device. So it stores electricity and also helps with power factor.
Does that handle your?
I'm done.
Okay.
Thank you.
Because there's only so much engineering I'm going to listen to. No. Okay, can we go
These
on?
are good conversations, that you have at the local
Did we already accept
establishments.
8D? I believe
But
we did.
the bottom line is power factor good, right?
Power factor is good. We were good. Like I said, we did a review of our system in 14.
So on this reliability thing, is the windmill working today?
Nope, it's not.
It's not?
Nope, it's not.
Okay, we'll talk, Travis.
Okay.
Item 9 is to award the bid for the relocation of the 115 kV transmission line along 32nd Avenue South in West Fargo. For our viewers at home, we have a transmission line that comes to us from the west into the city, and we're going to be moving it.
Yep.
Travis?
We're going to roughly relocate it about 20 feet or so, and we're going to change it out. We're not going to have a two-pole structure. We're going to go to a single-pole structure. We've had about, if I'm right, 5 or 6 qualified bids that we received. The lowest bid came in about $125,000 under the estimated cost, which is good. It's actually a local company, Avenia, will be doing the work for us. The one thing that we do have on this item is we are asking for you guys to approve it contingent upon the approval of the master agreement with West Fargo. So giving us the authority is once that agreement is done, or we have some type of approval from our lawyer to go ahead and tell Avenia to order the materials. The materials are about 14 weeks out from the time they order it. So it's going to be middle of June, could be as late as middle of July before we get this project going.
Where are we in terms of the master agreement?
We are actually having a meeting tomorrow to discuss some of that. John is trying to get as much of that put together, but it's going to take about another month or so before John will be comfortable with having it completed fully.
Okay, have all the terms that we wanted in the agreement been agreed to?
Yeah, for the most part, they just want to look, I think West Fargo hasn't really seen it in a while. They want to just confirm of what the language is, and I think they'll be comfortable with it.
Okay. Heidi?
Thank you, Chair. Could you Travis, can you tell us again why you have to move that line?
Sure. So City of West Fargo is actually going to...
Just couldn't help yourself, could you, Heidi?
No. City of West Fargo is going to be widening 32nd Avenue between Veterans Boulevard and Cheyenne Street. And by doing that, we have some structures that are in the way. And we've actually been working with them over the past 5 years to try to relocate this line because of ponds as well. So we're just going to complete the entire project in one shot. And we're going to actually relocate everything from the Cheyenne diversion ditch, or just west of the Cheyenne diversion ditch, all the way to just about 2 structures west of Veterans Boulevard. So,
And essentially, this also makes it better for West Fargo
Yep.
in terms of their development, but it also puts us in a better position in terms of
Yep.
controlling our easement area.
yep, we'll be able to control our easement area a little bit more. It'll move some of our structures away from the road, which is of concern to us as well. And it'll just straighten everything out. Right now, it's kind of jagged. It goes around a couple properties and things like that. So it'll be actually a benefit for everybody. And that technically, 70% of this cost is actually going to be paid for by the City of West Fargo. And we'll pay about 70%. And we'll pay about 30% of that cost.
This might be an opportune time to say that, you know, it's been a while since we've done a tour. I'm sure Mr. Regala hasn't been on that tour before. Maybe some members of the city council would like to go along. But to actually see what we have for infrastructure. Les, did you have a comment?
I have a comment. When we're relocating this line, the electrical power distribution to the city of Moorhead will not be affected
Nope.
because we have...
Because we have 2 feeds, correct. Yeah, there will be some type of an outage for the 1 feed coming into town for them to run the lines and replace the old lines. They'll have to do some type of a switch over. However, with the other feed that we have, we will not, that should not cause the city of Moorhead to go dark.
When you talk about an outage,
Yep.
it will not be something that the residents of Moorhead will
They won't-
experience.
They
Thank
won't
you.
see anything. It'll be just an outage for that section of line.
Okay. Unless Joe mess up. Okay.
So there will be an outage?
Who knows, you know, it's Joe. Could I have a,
I have a question.
you have a question? Go ahead.
Yeah. Looking at the bids that were received, the high is $1.6 million, and we accepted $623,000.
Yep.
Does that raise any flags that we need to review as far as why one's about $400,000 higher than what the actual bid we received?
No, we usually don't. I guess we kind of look at everything, and we provided this to our engineer that helped us with it. His estimate was about 3rd or 4th on the list, so, you know, he was trying to make sure that he was within the range and hoping that somebody would be low. In talking with the venue, they were actually very hungry for work. They're looking to keep their crews busy. With a lot of stuff being slow in the Bakken, they're looking for some work. Other companies that did bid it, you know, they may have had other projects already lined up and figured, well, depending on what's going on, maybe we can make some money off of it. So,
And I think if you look, John, in the attachments to this item, there's also a letter from our engineer that they have scoped out those bids to make sure that they are in compliance with our specifications.
yep. So,
Well, and actually, 3 of the bids were in the 600,000, I think, too. So we had a few bids that were pretty close at the bottom end, so. And we had a lot of bids, actually, so that was good. Sometimes you can do this and get 1 bid.
I think things have changed in the Bakken, which is making our contractors a little hungrier than they were last year at the same time.
I agree.
Could I have a motion, please, to award the bid?
So moved?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed, the same sign. Brings us down to item 10, which I'm assuming Mr. Schmidt's going to be addressing as well. Seems to be his night. That is to approve amendment number 5 to the consulting services agreement and change order number 5 for environmental abatement and demolition of the Moorhead Power Plant at Elm Street. Mr. Schmidt.
So this is, again, another change order for both the engineering firm and for the contractor that is demoing out the old power plant. A lot of this is due to concrete. There's a lot of additional concrete or large amounts of concrete that they're having to remove that weren't specified in the bid. So basically, it's taking a lot more time and money to to do this. So they're requesting roughly, Landwehr's requesting about $130,000, and Pier is asking for about $30,000 of additional fees to be paid. There's a little bit of asbestos-containing material that they also removed too.
Are these last pieces of the plant left, or is there still something in the ground that we have to worry about?
Yeah, so this basically covers up through, I think, the first 3 weeks of January. So I'm expecting another bill for up through the first week of March for concrete removal. It should be of about the similar cost. They should be about done with all the concrete removal.
Where are we with respect to our budget on this item?
We are way over.
Okay.
Based off, well, initially, I think when we started this, the engineering firm said about 1.5 million would be the cost to do it, plus engineering fees. Right now, we're at about 1.7 million with engineering fees. We did lower that down to about 1.2 million based off the bids we did receive. So, we are over the actual project amount by about, I think, 36%.
Okay.
But I mean, to be honest, not that big a surprise, right, if you take down a 100-year
No,
plan?
we did expect there to be a lot of parts of the project that, weren't known or unknowns that we're going to come up with the project just due to the age of the infrastructure and how things were built and the amount of, drawings or how everything was built, I guess, to the foundations. We didn't know exactly where everything was at and what was left and what was removed and how big things were. So.
I mean, we found like underground water reservoirs and stuff that we didn't even know existed, right?
Yep, yeah, we did have a couple of water tanks that we didn't know existed and removed those. Those were, low cost compared to the amount of concrete that they've had to remove. They've had concrete basically, 20, 30 feet wide in diameter and 15, 16 feet in the ground, just solid concrete with a lot of rebar in it, so it's really difficult to remove.
So where are we at percentage-wise in completing this project in terms of taking down the power plant?
Hopefully after March, really all they got left to do will be removing the coal, unloading the bank. The actual river structures are removed already, so those are taken care of. And then it'll be just restoration and filling in the hole that's left there currently. So I'd say they're probably in that 80% mark.
Okay. Any other comments or questions?
So how much coal is left there, do we know?
We're still figuring there's probably 2 to 3 carloads out there. They haven't touched it. They're trying to get rid of the concrete first before they move on to that.
Is there a market for that coal?
They are looking to see if they can get rid of it. I know they've been talking to NDSU. Some of the concerns they have is they are wondering how much dirt is tied into that coal.
How about Crystal?
Crystal will probably not use it there. I don't know what they use up there for. I think they use more natural gas than anything. So.
Yeah. Any other questions? Okay. Could I have a motion regarding item 10, please?
I move to approve item 10.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed, the same sign. That motion carries. Brings us to item 11, which is to approve the Capture the Sun Community Solar Garden Project and customer licensing forms. Dennis, I'm assuming?
Yep, Dennis can start, and I'll help answer questions if you have some.
Hi, I'm Dennis Eisenbrown, Energy Services Manager. I'm here today to basically ask you to, if you like the idea of the community solar garden, to basically give us permission to go ahead and start with the construction project and gather interest, gather participants, go ahead, hold the public meeting, and basically get the process started. The idea is to put a number of solar panels up by the wind turbines, lease those modules out to people for a 20-year period, and the power that those panels produce, those people then can take off of their power bill directly. And we would do that on an annual basis. I think it's a good idea. You're going to see a lot more solar activity this year with the legislation in Minnesota. They're looking to increase solar load from currently about 19 megawatts to about 400 megawatts by the year 2020. tremendous growth in Minnesota for solar right now. And we would like to be a part of that, and because we think it's the right thing to do.
Okay. Any discussion, any questions?
Well, here, let me just say a couple things. Because this is important. This is a strategic item. This is renewable energy again, where we're getting involved in, a lot of customer participation. Dennis is humble. We're kind of on the cutting edge here. I've been participating in an MMUA task force talking about solar and what we should be doing. And I actually, frankly, went to this task force because I wanted to see if somebody would tell us that we're crazy for doing this. Because we're not mandated to do this. Xcel Energy actually in Minnesota is mandated to do 1.5% of their resource, total resource portfolio, I believe by the year 2030.
Well, 2030 for Xcel, because they're
Okay.
nuclear.
So 2030, we're not. And I think, we talked about legislative type issues and stuff. We're trying to say that, we do things at the local level. We're doing some of these types of projects, and really that's what we're doing here. And actually MMUA is saying we need some communities to do some of these things. So everybody is kind of watching how we're doing this. So we are kind of plowing ahead all by ourselves. On that note, even how we're doing this, our attorney, John Bolger, recommended that we have a license agreement and not sell these panels to the participants out there. So we are offering a 20-year license to get the output from these panels versus selling that to them. There are some SEC rules that don't allow us to get into the trading business, and that's why the licensing is important. So that's kind of interesting. The location, we talked a lot about the location, and I, even in the last month, got somebody that said, hey, what about the power plant for that, for those solar panels? So it's still kind of out there. But as Dennis mentioned, I mean, we're pretty much settled on putting them in between the two wind turbines. And so if you have any, other ideas, now would be the time to bring that up. And then the cost to participants, it all depends on how the bids come in.
Right.
But right now, and we are giving them an incentive, so we're using our capture the energy incentive and moving that to buy down the cost of these panels. But we're looking, if the bids come in where Dennis expects them to, it'd be about $675 for people to buy one panel. And we've got, what, 80 of them out there?
Correct. That's what's
So-
expected.
Yeah.
And if the bids come in lower, then it would be less than $675. So, but I don't see that it would be any higher than that. If it's higher than that, I think the bids are too high. So,
So we're looking for 80 participants that will pay $675 each. We actually have had some of our larger customers that are interested in many more of those panels. And Dennis has kind of politely said to them, let's see how the public response is. We'll maybe sell you one, and if we have leftovers, we'll sell you more. Same thing with individuals. Because really, if somebody like the gentleman was up here a few meetings ago, wants to put this in the backyard, it costs $15,000 to $20,000. So this is really an alternative for people that want to participate in solar, but either don't want to put it on their home or can't put it on their home for some reason. They can do it. And we would do another phase of this next year, or if we got a big response this year, we may even do, I think you have alternates to do a larger.
it's an expandable system. We can make it really as big or as large or as small as we want. It doesn't require a lot of concrete or foundation work. We're talking about racks. We just, instead of having 2 racks, maybe we have 3 racks or 4 racks. It's really pretty simple technology. When they put together the solar arrays that we have now, those are more complex because they're dual axis tracking. Our contractor put those together. We had 3 arrays. They put 1 together per day. They had that done in 3 days. And this is much simpler than that. There's no mechanics at all. So.
My only concern is for those people who want to participate and can't afford to do so. And I don't know if we've adequately addressed that concern, because you'd like it to be available to anybody who lives in this community and who is a customer of Moorhead Public Service. That's my feeling, at least.
The fortunate,
Are you thinking a financing option?
I'm not sure. I want it to be available to virtually anybody in this community to be a participant in the program.
One of the things that we do have that we'll see that people can do is that they can, pay for their license the same way they would pay for their electric bill. They could come to the window, they could write a check, they could leave cash, or they could use a credit card. So they could finance it that way, or they could just put it on the bill, and then they would have 30 days to pay. But to bring the costs down, we're trying to make this fair and equitable and not be a burden to the rest of our ratepayers.
and we're open to ideas because, like you
Right.
say, we're pioneering on this. So we're trying to, like Dennis said, not have an impact to other ratepayers that may not want to participate in the program. So we're trying to make it.
But we're not patterning it after the wind generators.
Well, the wind, I mean, you talk about the wind generators, that was a very successful program because
When they worked.
we got both federal and state incentives for that program, and that thing actually paid off in about 11 years. Now, solar panels right now are still relatively high in cost, and if someone puts this in their backyard or on their roof, the payback is probably 20 years, maybe even beyond that. So, I mean, you're really not doing this for a payback per se, because it's not that great of an investment yet. Hopefully the cost will come down over the next few years. Right now, we're giving people an opportunity to stick their toe in the water, buy a module. We take care of it for them. We charge them a small maintenance fee. We deliver it from that module to their home, just like it was on top of their house, and they get a credit off of their bill annually for the kilowatt hours that it produces. So it's like having it right on your roof, but it's not on your roof, and you get the economies of scale of having us develop that system. So Heidi's got a question.
Any idea or any prediction as to what the payback at the end of the year would be? Any kind of guess?
About $30
About $30 a year?
per module. Right. They're estimated to produce about, on the average, 27 kilowatt hours per month. Figure 4 or 5 60-watt bulbs. It's not a lot of power that comes from each panel, but it's something. But yeah,
At
it's
this
about,
point in time.
it's a little over $2 a month, about $30 for the year, so.
Well, and what we're seeing is the cost coming down
Yeah.
tremendously. So in the next, and that's why, we're doing 80 panels this year. We're kind of doing a soft sell on this, so if people are really interested, and we're trying to say, let's do one this year, maybe if the costs come down, next year's panels may be less expensive and the payback might be better.
Does this help us with any of our required renewable energy things?
It helps us with SIP.
With our SIP,
Okay.
we count toward our SIP dollars. Yeah.
Yep.
Another question. So the individuals that get in this year for $675, if the costs come down next year and it's cheaper, and other individuals get in next year and it's $500, is there any buyback for those who got in earlier?
Yeah, I
or-
mean, the analogy, it's sort of like the CFL light bulbs when they first came out. They were $15 or more a piece, and now you can buy them for $2 or $3 a piece. You just can't go back and pay back the people that paid $15 for the bulbs. I understand the question, but I know.
Okay. 'Cause
Admitted,
I'm just trying to
Right.
guess what the questions are going to be from
Yeah.
residents out there.
The early pioneers, and really that's what they are, is pioneers, we'll do like we did with our Capture the Wind program. We'll have a plaque out there with their name on them, and, really thanking them for their participation and their foresight and pioneering spirit. Because, I mean, it may not be the best investment, but I mean, they're advancing renewable energy, really, so I mean, that's
Except
probably
it's
what we have.
really, I mean, in terms of pioneers, there's nothing really new about the solar energy technology. It really hasn't advanced in leaps and bounds over the last 15, 20 years when you liken it to, the new bulbs that we use for lighting and so forth. I mean,
Well, actually, using them for their own energy use is pioneering, because, I mean, up to this point, the cost has been so high that you've seen them generally along the roadway where the utility, it would be so cost prohibitive to send a wire to that location, a metering station or a temperature station or something like that along the highway. That's really the only place you've seen them. Now you're seeing them, I mean, even the concept of a community solar garden is a new concept. I mean, the technology has been there for a long time. I mean, it's an asset.
I grew up in Europe, and I mean, panels have been on roofs in Europe and Germany for 20 or 25 years. They're actually now, taking them down and replacing with a new version. So, I mean, it's time for us to do this. And I've said this before. I mean, unless there's a conflict of interest, I'll sign the first agreement for the first panel.
You're on my list, so. But yeah, no.
and he's going to want his name on that plaque, too.
Oh, yeah,
big
absolutely.
flag.
The technology has been around for a while. I mean, it was developed for the space program, essentially, for satellites. But what is unique here is the fact that now if you have a house that doesn't face south, and if you want solar, you can now have solar, and without having to put it on your roof. I mean, that's really the new concept here, is the idea of ganging them together for the public at large.
So what kind of PR are we going to do to get 80 or 800 panels put up? I mean, are we just going to do a soft sale? Do we do it and then put it in a newspaper? Where do we put it?
We are going to send letters out to our current Capture the Energy customers. There's a little over 200 of them. And then we will also put probably a statement on our bill for the month leading up to the 16th of April, which is when we're going to have the public meeting.
And survey participants.
Yeah, survey participants, and then see, what kind of response we get. And if we don't get enough, then, maybe we'll have to do something more. But
Could we maybe talk to the forum and have them put a little article in the paper saying, hey, there's this novel in this area, there's something cool, there's something new, give a little summary of it, so do it right beforehand. Because, I mean, even if you put an insert in the bill, I haven't seen my bill in about 15 years because I do electronic, right?
yeah,
So we want to make sure that we get the word out.
yeah. That's called a press release.
Okay.
Good idea.
Any other questions? John?
How large of capacity for these panels do we have at that location? So is it?
Well, we have probably room for I'm looking to put it between the current solar arrays and the east working wind turbine. And that is we have room there for about 200 to 300 kilowatts. And we're looking at putting up 20 initially. So there's plenty of room to grow if if everybody loves it and we want to keep going, we can build more there.
So that would be 800 panels? 20 is 80, or how many panels could we actually put there?
Well, we have 80 for 20 kilowatts, and so 10 times that, it's 800.
800,
Yeah.
Okay.
So, yeah, there's plenty of room for that. So.
Okay. And then since Board Public Service is going to technically own them, so
Yeah, we would own them.
with the budget that you're proposing, that would be for maintaining them. Are we going to have to put security fence out or any of that sort of issues?
The maintenance, there'll be, we're trying to allocate some maintenance to these solar panels, and that will be determined at the end of the year. We'll determine, how much time we've spent going out there, if we have to scrape off snow or that sort of thing, or if we've had to replace a panel due to vandalism. I don't see any kind of weather really damaging this unless we have a tornado. The idea is and then what we'll do is we'll take the maintenance and we'll subtract it, divide it amongst all the panel license holders, and then that'll be deducted off of their $30 and see what's left, and that's how we'll account for the maintenance as well. But as far as the fence is concerned, the initial idea is to not put a fence up there so people can go up there and walk around it. If you want to go up there and maybe put your initials on the back of your panel, I'm okay with that. Other utilities have done that, and then you can also look on the internet. You can look and see what your panel's doing. So, but if we have problems with vandalism, then obviously we'd have to put a fence up. But the idea is to not do that and make it accessible to the public.
Okay. If there's no further questions, I will entertain a motion.
I move to approve item 11.
I'll second that.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed, the same sign. That motion carries.
And I want my name next to Ralph's when it goes up on the plaque, on the next plaque.
They want to?
I have one request, Bill. Since this was passed by our commission, would you forward it to our 3 legislators?
Oh, sure.
So that they can have that information when they're in discussion with
bet. You bet.
renewables down in St. Paul.
Sounds good, yep.
You didn't mean that in a political way. I'm just sorry. I couldn't help myself. Item 14. This is to approve the resolution for the loan application to Minnesota Public Facilities Authority Drinking Water Revolving Fund for the 2015 Sims Downtown Water Main Replacement Project. Chris, are you talking to this? Feel free.
Chris Knutson, Water Division Manager. So I'm just going to give a brief overview of the Sims project just as a reminder and a couple brief updates, and then Nancy is going to go into some of the details regarding the Drinking Water Revolving Fund loan application and some of the process as to how we got to this point with that particular loan application. So just a reminder on the Sims project. The Sims project is actually going to be our largest water main replacement project in 2015. It's a little over 6,000 feet of water main replacement on Main and Center Avenues in Moorhead this summer. And we've been working with the Department of Transportation and the city for about 1.5 years on this project in terms of the design, and we're kind of getting down to the final details. We were hoping to bid this project about this time this year. Unfortunately, there's been some additional MnDOT reviews that have pushed it back about a month, so we'll hopefully be bidding this project in mid to late April or early May. So unfortunate that we had some delays in terms of review, but the city just recently, I believe last night, approved the advertisement for bids for this process, for this particular project. So the city and MPS are doing everything we can to expedite the bid process and get it rolling. But we're still hoping to get some good bids on the project, and it'll be a big project for MPS in terms of water main replacement.
Are the delays in the process going to cause additional costs?
You know, I think it's hard to speculate on that, but I think that with some of the recent slowdowns in the Bakken, we too may see some competitive bids for this project. It is a big project. So we're really hoping to get some economies of scale in working with the city and working with MnDOT on such a large project. That's the hope, but one never knows until it actually happens. So just as a background, I mean, if the bids do become unfavorable in this particular project, we would certainly be able to walk away from both the loan application and the project itself, and we could potentially rebid it so that this doesn't bind us in any way to the project.
Okay. Any further discussion or questions? John?
Approximately what kind of dollar amount are we anticipating to borrow from the fund?
For the loan itself, yeah.
Okay. And is the loan amount specifically tied to a project, or can you borrow more dollars at that kind of rate?
It's specifically tied to this project. So as part of the process, we have to actually apply to be eligible for this funding. When we apply, there's a very specific scope as to what the project is and what the money can actually
I think when you
be
go
used
through the
for.
public facilities funding process, it's very, very specific.
Correct.
That's the same we use for the water plant, right? Same type of funding for the replacement of the
High service
high service
pump
pumps, right?
station. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. Nancy, were you going to add anything to this conversation?
Just that this is the second loan process we've gone through. It is a quite lengthy process. It starts about 1.5 years in advance. Chris goes through a couple approvals with the state. He has to get on their project priority list. He has to make their intended use plan. And then this is step 3, the loan approval. And again, this doesn't commit us to anything at this point, but we send in the application, they look at our finances, they make sure that we have a plan in place to raise rates and raise funds to pay the loan back. So they do that, and then later, late spring, early summer, we should get a quote for an interest rate back from them. And at that time, by then, we'll have the bids in, so we'll know what the bids will be, we'll have the interest rate, we'll know what it's going to cost us.
Okay.
And then we'll have a chance to analyze and accept or reject that bid at that time. Same thing, if the bids come in high, we can still choose not to move forward with this loan and this project at any time until we commit to it.
Very good. Any questions?
And we got a really good interest rate on the high surface pumping, like 1.01 or 1.06?
1.02, so it was tremendous, and the costs of issuing this debt are almost zero, so we save a lot of money doing that. So it's a good funding instrument for the water division.
And congratulations on getting us through those first 2 steps already. That's big to get us on that list in the first place, so.
Yeah, we've kind of found we like this.
You're keeping
financing
Ralph
vehicle.
happy when you do these kind of replacement projects, yeah?
Yep.
Do we have any other applications in process for additional projects?
For any other projects on the water side, no. Probably the next one, well, I think it's going to be 2 or 3 years out before we would look at bonding again on the water side. And these funds are very specific, so it's drinking water funds, so they're not eligible for any of our electric projects. And it's got to be really specific on the water projects on what would be eligible. We also have to balance what we pay out of, operating revenues or out of revenues each year and what we bond for. So we're watching that blend of financing and paying by cash as we go too.
And maybe along the lines of John's question, I mean, if we had another big project, if we can finance it with 1.02% or whatever it may be, it could be worth us looking into it, because we know we have some other pipe in the ground that we would like to get out.
Correct, yeah. Chris and I have been talking about a couple other projects that might be good candidates for this.
Okay. Could I have a motion concerning item 14, please?
Move approval.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, the same sign. That motion carries. That brings us down to a relatively interesting topic at item 15, which is to approve consulting services for the strategic planning retreat facilitation. Who would like to speak to this, since Mr. Anderson is not here?
Well, I can begin the discussion if you would like.
Why don't
I'm
you?
willing to speak to it as well.
Yeah, let's let Mr. Schwant do his best here.
Okay, well, I've provided you some information, number one, on consulting services for facilitation, which was brought forward by Commissioner Dave Anderson. He's not here, so I'll do my best to
So we can
advance.
say anything we want about Mr. Anderson and/or this topic. Okay.
I guess so. And then number two, I put together, just a summary of the strategic planning, maybe just some thoughts to provoke you before we, not provoke, it's not a good word, before the Saturday meeting.
Do you really think we need provocation yet? I mean, it's,
Anyway, and I can go over those as well, but on the facilitation, I think Mr. Anderson's thoughts, and I have talked to a few other people that have done strategic retreats with their boards, and the main advantage of having a facilitator is so that you can release the chair and the general manager
there have been those who've tried to release the chair before. Yeah.
to participate fully in the discussion at the strategic planning retreat. Depending on the group, I mean, there's sometimes the chair is unable to really facilitate well, or the manager is not able to facilitate well.
You're doing well.
Yeah, thank you. And so that was, I think, Dave Anderson's thought process. I have looked into some facilitation services, and they can be rather expensive, I think. They also can be free if you find the right individual to do this. So I mean, there's a continuum of people. So I think one thing to talk about is, number one, do you want a facilitator? And if you do, then I can try and line one up. If you have any suggestions on, who that might be. So I think the first thing is, do you want one? Second one is, do you want to pay for one? And then maybe the third one is, how much would you like to pay for one? Because that may make a difference on what type of facilitator you may get.
Well, before Mr. Bakke expresses an opinion, which I'm sure he will, I will state the same thing that I said at the last meeting when I first heard about this, and that is, do we really need a facilitator to get 5 people to talk? But anyway, Mr. Bakke?
I don't think we need a facility to get the five of us to talk. I'm firmly convinced of that, and I'm speaking for Dave Anderson, and he is not shy either. So in my opinion, we don't need it.
Okay.
I'll go to the quick. We don't need it.
Okay.
Does the city council use one when they go on to retreat? She's shaking her head. They do not.
Yeah.
I didn't think they did.
And they appear to facilitate their discussions quite well without one.
I think they have people who are not shy to talk as well. That's my opinion.
Gentlemen?
The only thing I see is, like, I don't think it's an issue of getting us to talk. The issue may be to get us to shut up once in a while when necessary, but I think we can probably do that among ourselves and do that part. I mean, I never saw the person as a facilitator to, because we have controversy in the group. I was more looking at her or him as somebody to manage the meeting for us. But if we are comfortable to do it, I don't have an issue with that at all. I mean, like I said, talking is not the issue. It's staying maybe on track, because we'll have a whole bunch of stuff to go through.
Well, I'm assuming
4 hours.
that Mr. Schwant will be leading these discussions for us anyway, since you are the author of the existing strategic plan.
Yeah, I mean, I can do some of that. I can put some timelines in there. I mean, and we can talk about some of the things I listed here as well as what you want on the agenda. But I mean, we've done that in the past. I've facilitated these things before, so that's not a problem. It's just, it may be a different type of participation for myself if I'm facilitating as well. And that's what I've heard from other executive directors, so.
Mr. Regala, do you have a feeling either way? He says, well, okay,
I think if we were a dysfunctional group, I would say,
don't look at me when you say that.
I'm not going there.
Okay.
I think we would need one, but I think we have better ways to spend our money, or our customers' money, so I think we don't need it.
I tend to agree with exactly what he just said, and I'm looking forward to some good discussions, because we have a number of topics that do need some attention, not the least of which is all of the infrastructure that has to be changed out over the next several years. So I'm assuming that, is there a motion to approve item 15? Seeing none, that sort of killed that issue. Is there anything else that, Les, would like to bring something up for the good of the order?
Yeah, for the second part of what Bill presented to us, I believe he's got a really good start on the topics that we wanted discussed, that Dave has talked about, I have talked about, and the rest of you have talked about that we want. I think I would like to add the issue we talked about earlier tonight about sensitive positions related to issues, in particular with the state legislature, or even the federal legislature. And I'd also suggest that any of our committee members, including our representative from the city council, offer suggestions to you, Bill, over the next week and a half that we may want on there. And we have a pretty good idea what we're going to talk about before our next meeting.
Well, some of these topics could be a topic for an entire meeting, and you get right down to it.
We have to be a little careful on, how much we talk about each one and how many you want to get through. And I'll think about a little bit about how we're going to, give you information ahead of time. Like I said, we've been trying to get you information at these meetings. So some of that is just, we've already done it. And you may just have a quick question or something like that. We might put together some binders that have some of this information that you've already seen, so that it can spur some questions, and we'll give you those in advance. Really, the agenda.
I'm assuming by binders you mean electronic ones.
Yeah, well, I mean, we'll give you an electronic one. We may, if you want a binder, or if you want just electronic. Sometimes
I'm assuming it'll be on Dropbox. Heidi?
Thank you. I have never attended, obviously, any of your retreats.
We haven't had one.
We haven't had
Well, that's why.
So you could come to the first one.
Perfect. And just knowing how we have done them at the city, there are a lot of items on your list. And like you said, some of them could be an entire meeting themselves. Have you thought about having the commissioners rank them or do some sort of priority so that you know which ones you want to spend more time on versus some of the ones that are less concerning or less priority?
I'm thinking exactly the same way you are, and it's sort of similar to those situations when we were able in the past to have joint meetings with the city council. And it was always my feeling that we should have no more than 1 or 2, 3 issues max during those meetings, because it's such a rare event that we get them to sit down and talk with us and have that opportunity. And so from that standpoint, I feel the same way about this, that we shouldn't have so many items on here that we have too much chaff that's coming at us. I would suggest that we do prioritize somewhat and spend as much time as possible on those major issues that we should be looking at as a body.
Yep. Well, we can send this, third list along with the one we just added, and we'll wait a week and think about other items as well, and then we'll send it out in a survey, and then you can rank them, and then we'll just take the top 2, 3, or 4, however much we have time
you look
for.
at the water supply issue, for example, or a drought. I mean, that's a major item that could take an entire meeting.
Well, the water supply issue actually is probably the last joint meeting we had with the council. We
That's not-
actually had a meeting with the council to talk about this issue about 5 years ago. And that was the one item that, like you mentioned, that we talked about, and we had some presentations, and now we're back. That's probably going to be one of the items that we talk about. That's going to, I would guess, come up right up to the top of the ranking.
It really is an important issue. Okay?
So, yeah, that's a
Anything
good
further?
point.
Is that, okay? And you're cordially invited, of course.
I added that thing and thinking more about it, that doesn't belong on a retreat.
Pardon?
Our responses to political situations, that's not a retreat item.
From a broader standpoint, communication between staff, myself, and you is part of that. And so, we'll keep it on there, but it may drop down to the bottom anyway.
Drop it
so.
down.
Yeah, I think you pretty much know our feelings on those issues already. But Chris has got some direction to go, or needs direction to go on the subject of water. And, you look at the issues that Rolf has been so gallantly talking about in the past in terms of infrastructure and what we have to do to maintain that infrastructure. Those are some very big issues that deserve our attention. And let's not divert that attention to issues that we can handle in other venues.
Well, like the Capture the Sun one, that one's really off the list because we talked about that
We just
tonight.
talked about it.
Yep.
And, I think we should look for the big issues
Well, and from a
strategic standpoint.
Well, from a strategic planning standpoint, the reason why we haven't had a retreat before, is generally we talk strategically at these meetings, and we do bring up these items like the Capture the Sun. We talk about them. We make sure we slow the meeting down so we have a good discussion on what we want to do. And but this will be an interesting meeting. This will be a different meeting because, we'll have a chance to look at some issues and say, because that water supply issue is going to be a difficult issue to talk about because we got to decide.
That may
a
take
direction.
more than one meeting to talk about that, particularly in view of some of the things that are going to be coming up in terms of whether or not we commit to go in certain directions.
Help.
And I still hold that particular issue also will require, or should require, a meeting between us and the council. Because it's of such big importance.
Yeah.
And it has political implications that we obviously don't want to be involved in.
And there's a couple other sensitive ones on that list too that, you may want to talk about at the strategic planning level.
Yeah, I see these. There's some that, quite frankly, have been on a list for about 20 years that we really haven't brought down to.
Well, and we're saying, do you want us to pursue these or not?
Okay.
So that's, just give a thumbs up or thumbs down and we'll
Okay.
put it on the list and we'll do them if you
So
want
you're
us
going to
do it.
circulate something amongst our membership so we can talk about prioritization?
We will do that, probably
Okay.
a survey monkey.
And to both of
Casey
our
likes to send
liaison
out.
members as well, please.
Okay.
Anything further?
Nope.
So we have a strategic planning meeting set for March 28th without a facilitator, and nothing further. This meeting is adjourned.